Welcome back. This is Ask the Compound. I'm Ben Carlson with you today. Duncan is in Liverpool fulfilling his dream of becoming a baby boomer on a Beatles tour. So I am joined by everyone's favorite tax expert, Mr. Bill Sweet.
Howdy. Wore my silliest Duncan hat that I could find in the closet.
Okay.
It's not quite there. I think it's like 70% Duncan.
Can't pull it off. You needed a beer.
No, I can't.
We have some great questions today. Bill's going to help us with the tax stuff. We're going to talk about a millennial who wants to know if Social Security is going to be around when they retire. We're going to talk about downshifting, that glide path portfolio risk as you age, how to pay for LASIK eye surgery. My wife got that once. When DIY investors should consider an advisor. We get a lot of questions on that. Understanding the rule of 55. Never knew it existed until Bill Sweet told me. And then how to prepare yourself for the tax man when you retire. Today's show is sponsored by the Compound Newsletter. Go to thecompoundnews.com/subscribe. We have updates there. It's everything you missed from the Compound team, from blog posts to podcasts to YouTube videos. You'll figure out who the next guest is on the Compound and Friends. A lot going on there. Merch drops, all that stuff. It's good. We got a good team that runs that.
Yep, yeah. Our guy Rob runs the back end of that and does a great job.
All right. Bill's in the studio today. Glad to have you with us. Let's tag team these questions. I will read the first. You read the first one because I got a diatribe on this one, and we'll go every other.
Great. I love it. Let's kick it off. Let's go. I saw the report this week that said Social Security will be insolvent by 2035. As a card-carrying millennial at 35, I'm operating under the assumption that Social Security will not be there for me when I retire. Is that a fair assumption, considering trillions of dollars we'd added in government debt since the pandemic? Ben Carlson, what do you think?
This is a question I get regularly from young people. A lot of people operate under this same assumption as Dan. So, John, throw up the scary headlines here. I saw them all this week as well. I feel like this happens once a year. Insolvency was a big word, heading for trouble. Again, insolvency, it sounds dire when you look at the headlines. And I know a lot of young people feel this way. There's too much government debt. Politicians won't do anything to fix the entitlement shortfalls. Boomers are going to leave the cupboards bare, right? We got to blame everything on the boomers. So I looked at the actual report. I went straight to the source. I went past the headlines. I went to the report. Here's what I found, Bill. If Congress does not act by 2035, that's true. The fund that is used based on the current projections will run out. And that it varies one year to the next, depending on rates and these sorts of things. It actually added a year this year. But at that time, because people are still paying Social Security taxes, assuming we don't get rid of those, in 2035, there will be sufficient income coming in to cover 83% of scheduled benefits.
Oh, wow. That's more than I thought.
So while it is true that there's going to be more money going out than coming in, it's not like it's going to be everyone that's currently paying in is paying more than there's 17 cents on the dollar that we need to cover, right? So, John, throw up the chart here. This is from the actual report. Their reports look like they come from 1984, like they haven't gone forward from there yet, but it shows basically the cost, right? The scheduled payable benefits, which they can kind of estimate pretty, it's not that hard to estimate because we have demographics, you can see these things coming. It's got to be pretty close. So like I said, 2035, 83% of benefits will be covered by those Social Security taxes coming in. By 2098, when I will be, carry the one, 117 years old, right? If I continue to eat well and exercise, by 2098, end of the century, there'll still be 73% funded based on Social Security taxes, right? So, yes, we don't have enough money to cover people continuously to pay out the benefits from this trust fund. And if we would have just invested it in stocks, we probably would, right?
Yeah, that was a Bush-era proposal 20 years ago.
Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
But that's a long, long runway to shore things up. And in the meantime, they're still there. So the way I see it is there's three options. You can tell me what you think of these. Number one, people should get used to the idea of their Social Security benefits getting slashed, right? If there's nothing happens, they get slashed 83% basically by 2035. You're going to get a cut in your Social Security benefits. Number two, politicians have time to act. So taxes might be going up. Maybe they raise the ceiling on wealthy people for Social Security taxes, right? Maybe they push out for anyone under the age of 50. Anyone with 50 and over is grandfathered in. 50 and under, your retirement age is going to be later, right? They can do things to kick the can down the road or whatever. And the third option would be the U.S. government really likes to spend money. They like to borrow, and we simply go into more debt to fill the shortfall, right? Yes, government debt seems bad now. Guess what? It's going to be higher in the future. And I think one thing we learned in COVID was there are no restraints there besides inflation. And inflation was a restraint this time. Maybe that'll hold people back. But if the government decides we're going to prioritize spending money on Social Security in the future to fill this shortfall, they're probably going to do it. So if I had to guess, we're probably going to see a combination of 2 and 3. I don't think any politician in their right mind would slash Social Security benefits on current retirees.
Oh, yeah. That's political suicide. I would agree.
Yeah. So
because old people vote, Ben. Turns out.
I mean, yeah, who are we kidding? They're probably going to keep kicking the can down the road until they have to do something. But don't you think that this is, like, it's not as dire as the headlines make it appear?
Yeah.
It's not going bankrupt. There's still going to be money coming in from workers. They can increase that money if they want to raise Social Security taxes on certain people. It's fixable.
Yeah, we didn't plan before the show, Ben, but your 3 bullet points were exactly what I wrote down. Starting with the premise that it's not that bad. I'm not going to say it's good, but 80% of a benefit is not bankruptcy. It's not insolvency. These are big, scary words. To your point, they gather headlines.
Yes, the insolvency word is being thrown around, and I feel like way too loosely.
Yeah. What really happens, Ben, is they're going to match taxes coming in to distributions going out. That's the mechanism that fixes this. And yeah, projections are about 80%. That's not terrible. So my solutions were, number 1, reduce benefits. There's only 4 options here. Number 1, reduce benefits. 2, raise taxes. That's no fun. I want to talk about that in a second.
Sorry, on the reduced benefits thing, do you think they could someday say, listen, if you're worth X amount or you make X amount, you're not getting any?
Yeah, means test it. They could means test it. That's absolutely true. Change the law. I mean, it require. I mean,
there'd be people who would still be angry about that, saying, no way, I put money into this. I'm getting it out.
Down. That's my 5th solution. But yeah, 3 would be delay retirement age, and 4 is the Bill Sweet solution, which I want to get to last. But taxes, Ben, there is a flat tax in the United States of America. Did you know this, Ben, the flat tax? It's called FICA, and you pay it. I pay it. Everybody in this chat pays it. It's 15.3%, and it goes to fund Social Security and Medicare. So to your point, Ben, raising taxes is another solution. Again, that has been political suicide in the past, but that's a very easy solution. The insolvency of the Social Security fund, quote unquote, is a political problem. This is not a bankruptcy problem.
Because if we get to that point in the future, and people say, "Wait, you're going to prioritize spending on this instead of my retirement, which I was promised?" No way. See you later.
Totally. So I've got another one for you. It's the Bill Sweet solution. John, can we chart on the first chart that I had? When do Americans actually file for Social Security benefits, Ben? Data show, this is most recently updated in 2017. It really hasn't changed that much, but 80% of filers file at or before their full retirement age. Very few, less than, let's say 10% of filers file after their full retirement age, which is somewhere between 67 and 70. Ben, question, why do people file late? Like, what's the benefit there?
Sorry, someone in the chat just had paper napkin on, and that made me laugh.
I thought about it. Yeah, I've got real graphics.
So you're saying 80% of the people do it which is at what age?
60% do it early, yeah. So therefore, before their full retirement age. The reason you delay, though, to answer what I'm trying to go to, is you get a higher benefit, right?
Yeah,
the longer you delay. So the Bill Sweet solution is, look, I got a deal for you. Americans love retiring early, right? And if you can afford to do so, great. I've got a great solution. Let's do an age 60 retirement, right? And you only get 50% of your benefit. My point is, there are ways to tweak this that are politically possible, that all you have to do, and use people's incentives, frankly, to help the folks that want to delay, right? So you don't even have to increase later filing benefits. I think all you need to do is tweak the early benefit options. And again, maybe give people the option to retire at age 60.
Which is funny because all the personal finance wisdom you hear is delay, because you get it works out to 8% a year or something if you wait till 70, right? Whatever the number is, it's a much higher number.
And people are living longer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and people are living. That's the easy one. Again, under the age of 45, let's say I'm going to be 43 this year. Under the age of 42, your retirement date is going to be further out in the future now. It should be.
Solution. Yeah. But again, I would put it in the hands of people making individual choices, because you're exactly right. The individual would likely benefit by delay. However, some people can't or don't want to wait. So I would make them do it, and then I'd help them finance the system, frankly, a smaller benefit.
There's no guarantees of what politicians will or won't do in the future. You never know, but I think this is the most important retirement plan ever enacted. So I got some charts to show why. So John, throw up this next chart here. Nearly 23 million adults or children would fall below the poverty line without Social Security. So it's 4 out of 10 if you exclude Social Security that would be under the poverty line. If you include Social Security, it's 1 out of 10. So basically 3 out of 10 people 65 or older are being pulled out of poverty because of Social Security. So John, throw my next chart up here. This is Social Security as a percentage of retiree income. This was a study done a few years ago, so it might be a little different now, but 50% of more of people 65 or older rely on Social Security for 50% or more of their income in retirement. 1 out of every 5 people requires Social Security with 90% or more of their retirement income. There would be people who would be literally out in the streets probably if it was not for Social Security. This is a
Right.
this is a very important program to a lot of people, and that is why politicians would be ridiculous for them to ever go after this. This is one of the most important, and the Great Depression led to this, which is kind of crazy because there literally was no backstop in the Great Depression, right? There was no unemployment insurance, there was no Social Security, none of this stuff. So it's kind of funny the worst crash in history led to some backstops that we're still living with today. And it is true that, there are fewer workers able to cover the payouts going to people, and the baby boomers living longer is going to put some strain in this system. But that's all been mapped out in these reports.
Yep. And the U.S. economy, very strong. And there are some very easy solutions here. That's the whole main point, is that there's a lot of problems we have in this country that have very difficult solutions. This isn't one of them. I would agree.
The solutions here are relatively easy.
I would agree. So let's get to a hard problem.
Next one. All right. I'm 41 years old, federal employee for 19 years, plan on being a federal employee for my career, probably for that pension, right? Preliminary retirement target is age 60, which is 2042. Base salary, $115,000. TSP contribution, 15%. Love the TSP for its simplicity and low costs. I do too. 2 questions. First, given my age and time horizon, my current allocation appropriate? This is a lot of people ask this. So they have 100% in the TSP stock market fund, 40% in the C fund, 40% in the S fund, 20% in the I fund. So that's like large caps, small caps, international. Consider myself to be a moderate aggressive investor who is comfortable with the up and down swings that come from being invested in the stock market. Second question. What age should I consider starting to mix the G fund or even the F fund? The TSP does, there's a lot of letters here. TSP does have target date funds, but the 2040 life cycle fund currently consists of 21% G fund and the 2045 is 15%. To me, both of these percentages seem too high given that I'm 17 years from retirement. Am I off base? This is from Blair. We've talked about the TSP before and the G fund, but let's fill people in who aren't familiar. TSP is a thrift savings plan. It's a federal government retirement plan, and I've pounded the table on this for years that every American who is an employee should be eligible for this plan.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, my thesis, Ben, is all the 401ks, 403bs, 457s, it's not just complex, but it's costly. And basically the government's chosen for years to push the administration of these plans onto corporate retirees.
Companies pay them, and then the people in them pay them high fees.
Really, you do. Yeah, that's it. It's a fees. It's you and me. So ultimately, why not have this,
And not everyone has access to a 401k. I think it's something like 50 to 60% of any employees have access to it. A lot of people don't have access to a workplace retirement plan. This one, what I think it's the best because the fees are ridiculously low. It's like 2 to 3 basis points per fund. BlackRock administers this thing. The G fund, which they mention here, is probably one of the best funds ever created. This is another reason why federal employees have it great, because the G fund literally cannot go down in value. So interest rates go up, bond prices go down. This is kind of like an ag fund, but essentially it's more of a money market fund on steroids because you get the higher rates from being invested in bonds, but they have some sort of floor put under. I honestly don't know how it works. They don't allow you to lose money in this fund. You basically just get the yield.
It's probably one of the best-run government programs that I've been aware of. And
it really is.
Department of Defense, they opened it up and sort of turbocharged this a lot when they reformed the government pensions in 2015. So Ben, Blair's question is generally like, hey, is my allocation okay? I've got 19 years to go to retirement. She seems to be relatively aggressive. Like, what do you think about her allocation relative to where someone else should be? I mean, should she be more invested in that magical G fund?
Well, my cop-out answer here is like the risk profile and time horizon. That's the hard part. I think the hard part about this question is the glide path, and that's what we've been getting a lot of questions on. This is like, when do I know how to de-risk and when I should? Because it's funny for me personally. I think right now, when I retire, I probably won't get that much more defensive. Maybe some more cash. I don't think I'm going to really turn I'm an equity investor. I'm fine with that risk, and I understand as long as I have some liquidity on the side, I'm going to be okay to let that equity. But ask me in 20 years, maybe my answer will be different. And so that's the hard part here. Is Blair said, well, in 17 years, I want to retire. Now, what if you get to that point? You don't. So it's a difficult question to answer. I think the Nick Majuli answer, if you're going to do the spreadsheets, would be you dollar cost average out. Like you dollar cost average in and out. Like you don't do it all in one fell swoop, because if you do that, you wanted the equity to run more. So probability wise would be let the equity run, so you take off 1 or 2% per year to get to your target. I think that makes sense for a glide path. And if you look at, I think the target date funds are actually a good benchmark though. Look at what they have, and if you decide that's too conservative for me, then you can kind of figure out, okay, I'm going to be below that level. If it's too aggressive, going to go above that level.
Right.
So I think that's a good target date funds are a really good benchmark for people for these kind of problems, because all these fund companies have thought about this too.
Right. So for me, putting my CFP hat on, there is a sequence of returns risk that comes into retirement. However, the counterbalance to that is, on a long enough timeline, equities historically have always outperformed bonds and cash over a long enough time period. Trouble is, on a long enough time period, you need that money, and you probably want to spend it. So I think with 19 years to go, I'm roughly the same age as Blair. I'm still leveraged 100% to equities on my side, because I'm going to make these decisions with about 10 years to go. I'm going to sit down with a CFP at Riddle's Wealth Management. I'm a company man, and begin to look at the financial plan. I think the financial plan should drive these types of decisions, Ben.
Yeah, and it's also not only the time to retirement, it's the time in retirement. So we could be talking, if it's 20 years to retirement, I don't know, add 20 or 30. We could be talking a 50-year time horizon still.
Yep.
I think one of the easy ways to do the glide path too is just change your new allocations going forward.
Yeah.
Right. Before I was 100% equities. Now I'm going to have 5 or 10% go to bonds, and slowly work your way into them. Yeah. I think that kind of makes
drip
sense.
Drip and drab.
But like most things in investing, there's no easy answer here. There's no perfect answer. It's what you're comfortable with.
I would sit down with a financial professional who can give you advice on this topic. But it's a great question, very common one, Blair. And good luck to you. Thanks for serving our
next
country.
question is something we've never got before.
Well, hold on, Ben. I got a curveball for you. So, John, can we pull up curveball number 2? Number 1.
Okay.
Question for Ben, and please, and the listeners, if you can answer, if you could choose one celebrity sidekick to host Ask the Compound with, would it be number 1, Ed McMahon? We're gonna dig him back from the grave. Number 2, Kelly Ripa, best arms in the business, in my opinion. Number 3, Andy Richter, or number 4, Gail from Oprah's Gail. Which one would you choose? Celebrity Ask the Compound host.
Good question, Bill. I was a huge Conan fan back in the day, so part of me thinks Andy Richter, but I think I was more of a Conan fan than a Richter fan. How about this? I like the Ed McMahon, but I want Phil Hartman playing Ed McMahon from SNL.
Oh, wow. That's a great curveball. Love it.
You are correct, sir.
Yeah. You can eat I want to scream this Frank Sinatra thing, but it involves a curse word, and this is a family show. Ed McMahon, famously a Marine pilot. He retired as a colonel, and you bet everybody in that generation
really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, knew his rank. Huh. And so he's kind of like in our memory, he's like the jolly, Johnny Carson sidekick. That dude was a killer. Like he was a killer.
Okay.
He was a killer pilot. Yeah. So, okay, back to business. If I wanted to get LASIK eye surgery, Ben, would it be better to use my HSA funds or just my savings? I'm privileged enough to be saving around 25% of my income every year since graduating in 2020. Beyond the HSA, I have about $8,000 in 2 savings accounts. Don't worry, Ben, I still have a nice balance of savings for my future and having fun with friends and family, traveling, and treating myself. LASIK is a good chunk of money, about $3,500. This will hurt my savings. You do not have to bring out Bill Sweet for this. Can someone else help me? Ha ha ha. Ben, what do you think?
We did bring out Bill Sweet. All right, this is from Johnny.
Yeah.
First of all, sounds like a pretty well-balanced financial plan for someone in their 20s.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Solid savings rate. We talked about that last week. They're still enjoying themselves a little bit. You tell me what you think here in terms of tax efficiency and such, but I feel like a lot of spreadsheet warriors think like the HSA is an additional tax-deferred account. I'm never touching it. I'm not going to use it what it's for. Like, this is the reason you have it. Use it. Right. Isn't that the whole reason?
Right. Yeah, that's funny. I was going to take the other side, to be honest with you. So
okay.
I'm glad you led there.
It.
Yeah, so HSAs are really, really neat. They're like super IRAs. You get a tax deduction up front. There's no tax on the distribution, right? Similar to a Roth. But the neat thing about HSAs is you do not have to match the distribution in the year that you get the medical expense. That's one of the coolest things about HSAs, and it's really kooky. There's no way.
You can defer it forever, basically.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. But back to your point, Ben, you brought this up several times. Like, nobody designed this plan. Nobody thought about this when they put the rules in, but that's the rules. So my advice to Johnny would be, look, pay for it with cash, right? Because you got the savings. That's what the savings are for. But you have that HSA there. It's there. It's still an asset. It's on your balance sheet. And why take that tax-free distribution if you can earn a tax-deferred amount that's ultimately going to come out tax-free in the future on $3,000, $4,000? Why not just keep that in the HSA and defer?
So the HSA is more of a backstop.
Yeah, that's what I'd argue. And if you get into any trouble, if you need to buy a house or something of that nature, hey, then you pull up that receipt, you take the HSA distribution then, and you get that money tax-free
Okay,
anyway.
so you're saying, so even if he does the LASIK this year, and he decides, I'm going to buy a house 3 years from now, he pulls out that receipt and can still pull the HSA funds out of there tax-free.
Yep, exactly. That's what we understand about the rules, and I don't think this is on the docket to change anytime soon with Congress. So that would be my advice. And again, but I do agree with your point. Simple beats complex. The HSA is for medical. There's not a wrong answer here, but I think in general, if you have the savings,
yours makes more sense than me because again, if you have it there, that's like your trump card.
Yeah, and I'm the spreadsheet warrior.
I play a lot of Uno with my kids, and I always save the +4 right when they think they're going to win. Boom, +4.
Oh, you're that guy. You're that guy. You don't let the kids win? I don't let the kids win.
I used to let them win, and now
it makes them weak.
I'm not going to let them win anymore.
No, it doesn't. So speaking of Carlson's, that brings us to our next bonus question, John.
All right.
So favorite, Ben, this is your favorite non-Ben Carlson. We have Gretchen Carlson, famous White House reporter. She's with CBS News now. Tucker Carlson, if you're more right-wing, a little more Putin curious, you might be interested in Tucker Carlson. Number 3, I'll throw in Ben Carson. I know it's not Carlson, but I'm sure, Ben, when people ask you this or Google, they always compare you to the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Or 4th is actually Ben Carlson, who is a Toronto-trained Shakespearean actor. Have you ever seen any work from Ben Carlson? Question 1. And question 2, who's your favorite non-Carlson Carlson?
The funniest Twitter responses I ever get in my mentions are Ben Carson, because people always, when he was still alive, would always say, "What are you doing, sir?" or "I'm a huge fan," and sorry, no, I'm not Ben Carson. So I would get the most from him.
Okay.
I have been asked before if I'm a Canadian actor, but that's not true either.
Right.
But yes.
You do have that Canadian Midwestern kind of vibe, that twang.
For some reason, people thought on Twitter that I am actually Ben Carson.
Great.
Good question for the bonuses. All
R.I.P.
right,
Dr.
John,
Carlson.
throw it up here. Next one. I'm a DIY investment person with a background as a pension actuary. I'm turning 50 this year, and we have a total account value of around $2 million. Not to brag, well done. We live in a low-cost area of living in Appalachia. My concern is that my wife isn't part of the DIY investment committee. It's a committee of one. I love investing, but should I get an advisor now so that if something happens to me, I'll know my wife has a good advisor? I'd miss my Sunday morning asset allocation review, but maybe I wouldn't worry as much. My wife is very smart, but she doesn't love maximizing returns like I do. This is from Al. Very well. This is very well written.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's a PhD level question from Al.
I'm going to move to the mountains just so I can say I live in Appalachia, because it just sounds cool.
Hey, good country, great camping up there. Yeah.
I like the investment committee of one, all that sort of stuff. I feel like the more questions I have, or the more conversations I have with people as they get older and middle age and approaching older retirement age, and they go through the financial planning process, peace of mind is a huge goal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Very hard to quantify. So I think even $2 million at age 50, you're doing phenomenally. I think if you told your wife, listen, $2 million, we're in good position, I think she'd probably still prefer to have peace of mind if, God forbid, step off the street and a bus hits you, something happens.
Right.
You know, am I going to be okay? This key person risk. And so this is something we hear from a lot of DIY, like a lot of people. Not everyone needs an advisor. We're, like you said, we're company men, but we understand there are a lot of people who study this stuff and know what they're doing and can be a DIY person and handle it. And we've talked to plenty of people over the years who can do that. And if you can, more power to you.
Yeah.
But if you are the CEO of the family or the CFO of the family, and something happens to you, God forbid, what's your backup plan? I think there needs to be some sort of plan B. Even if you don't hire an advisor, there should be conversations and things going on as a backstop.
Have a plan. Yeah, I had 2 suggestions for Al. Number 1, Ben, is the one that you just mentioned, which is develop a relationship with an advisor that you feel would care for your most loved person in the world if, God forbid, something were to happen to you, or you become incapacitated or just something of that nature, right? Because unfortunately, Father Time is undefeated. This is all inevitable. My second thing, though, is, and Al would know exactly what he's doing in this space, Ben, if he's an actuary and a pension gentleman. Interest rates, as you know, Ben, have increased dramatically in the last 2 years. And in my opinion, this type of situation where you care about one person in the world and her life expectancy is likely going to outlive yours.
Yeah, that's the actuary part. Women tend to live longer than men.
They do. And on average, not, again, stereotypes are not real, but, tend to be a little less financially savvy, especially compared to a PhD actuary. Al's more savvy than I am, certainly in that realm. So I would suggest some sort of, annuities are a dirty word at Red Hills Wealth Management and other places, but this is a perfect scenario for that, especially given the increase in interest rates. If you could lock in a lifetime payment for your loved one and spouse, even if it's conditional, it doesn't have to kick in. You can annuitize later. That, to me, Ben, solves the problem, because you make that decision for her and you say, look, this is going to provide for you in your life. And if you make it conditional on something that happens to you via trust or other estate plan, I think all the problems are solved, in my opinion. Not all. There's always going to be a problem. But I would debate between those two options, and I'm sure that you've had friends who could help you out in option 2.
I'm being told in the chat it's Appalachia, not Appalachia. My way sounds better.
It makes me more hungry. So speaking of my way, can we move on to bonus question number 3? Ben, if you could choose an Ask the Compound guest, a celebrity starlet from Hollywood, so these are the hottest ones that I could find as far as popularity, would you choose number 1, Zendaya? Would you choose Florence Pugh? Would you go with Jennifer Lawrence? Or would you go with Sydney Sweeney? Which would you choose to co-host Ask the Compound next week?
Can I have just a rotating? Can we do an octagon box?
Does your wife watch this podcast? Does that matter? Yeah. No, you have to pick one.
Okay. Listen, I watched Euphoria. It freaked me out too much. So thinking about my kids become teenagers. So Zendaya, she's
2
out.
out of 4. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Sydney Sweeney too. Right?
Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah.
Very good in Anyone But You. I liked it. Good rom-com.
Okay.
No. Out. She was too cheesy.
Oh wow. Okay.
I'm a Jennifer Lawrence fan. How's that?
Yeah,
She's like older millennial, right?
She's hysterical too.
Very funny in her recent comedy too. So yeah, I'll go.
She'd be great.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Top of my list too.
She seems like she knows how to invest.
Yep. Great. Okay.
All right. Let's see. Question 5. Question for Bill. Is there a minimum withdrawal amount when using the rule of 55, or could I initiate withdrawals using the rule, then withdraw $1 a year until I fully retire a few years later? This is from Michael. I got to say, I've never heard of the rule of 55 before you mentioned it. Nerd out on us here.
Yeah, the answer is no. Next one. No. The big picture is Rule 55, Ben, you need to retire at 55 or later. It's not when you're 55. And if that is the case, from your employer-sponsored 401k plan, you can take a distribution without paying the 10% penalty at age 55, right. 56, 57. So $1 would be perfectly fine. I don't know why, Ben, you would take a distribution from your 401k plan to pay for a half a cup of coffee, but you could certainly do so. There's no limit. It's just like literally just you avoid the 10% penalty. That's all there is to it.
Okay.
So speaking of people named Michael, Ben, if you could choose another Animal Spirits host named Michael, would you go with number 1, Michael Strahan? Number 2, Michael Jordan. He took that personally. Number 3, Michael J. Fox, or number 4, Michael Fassbender? Which Michael would you choose to co-host Animal Spirits with?
Big Back to the Future guy, but Michael Strahan is a media personality.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
Right? So I think I'd have to go. And honestly, MJ, despite being the greatest athlete probably of my lifetime, was not like a great actor or anything, so not a lot of personality, actually.
Oh, wow. Shots fired. Shots
True?
fired at the GOAT. Yeah. What, you not a Space Jam guy? Your kids are out on Space Jam? Like the original. The second one was horrible.
He's a big gambler, kind of like Michael Batnick as well. But yeah, I'm going to go Strahan.
Okay. I'm with you. I would go Fassbender because he's super weird. Like he's kind of a freak. And I think that would be really interesting. But it could, like Jordan, it could go in either way. Either you're winning 6 NBA titles, right? And you're the best basketball player who's ever walked the earth. Or you're the owner of the Wizards and you draft Kwame Brown and things really, really go south, right? So like that, I think would be the Michael Jordan conundrum. The binary outcomes, it's boom or bust, right?
You came prepared with the bonus questions today.
Great. Yeah. Well, I've got one more. I've got one more for you.
Well, we got one more too. All right,
Yep.
John, last question. I think this is you.
Oh, great. Not to brag, but I sold my share of partnership in 2022, and I kind of parked, not figuring out whether or not I have the guts to retire. Having lived through the dot-com bubble and the great financial crisis, I was one of those saps who went all to cash in 2012 and never looked back until 2020. I made it for lost grounds. I'm planning my exit from the working world. I'm hoping to hear from Bill Sweet. Again, I guess, Ben, if you say Bill Sweet 5 times, I appear.
That's true. You come.
About capital gains tax planning. I was surprised to see tiers. See, I told you. And even more surprised to see every time I do an online calculator giving a different answer on how taxes would be assessed in capital gains. If I'm drawing a mix of dividends, a modest $50,000 income, and realizing gains, are the brackets based solely on AGI, or would a large capital gain push me to a higher tax bracket? Ben, I'm going to sit back and let you handle this one.
Well, what I like about this question is that they at least admit when they messed up. I think the good thing for people here too, so this person obviously made a decent amount of money selling their partnership, but they say, like, listen, I was a sap. I went to cash for years, and it was a big mistake. And it's funny because like one really good decision can actually outweigh a bunch of mistakes along the way, which is good to know for people. So they're basically trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to retire. I don't understand a lot about capital gains taxes. Bill Sweet, please help.
Great. Yeah. And I would argue, Ben, we all pay our tuition in one way or the other, right? So I've certainly learned a lot of lessons and got my face dirty early. So, John, can we pull up the last serious chart that I have? So this is going to be a complex chart here, but I just want to talk capital gains tax stacking for a second. So when you do a tax return, what you do is you total up really 2 buckets of income, your ordinary income and then your tax qualified income, which are long-term capital gains and qualified dividends. And those are subject to a different tax rate than your ordinary income. So all the way to the left, in this example, I'm showing $120,000 of income for a married filing joint couple in 2024. You get to take a $29,000 standard deduction, right? So your taxable income is what matters. To answer John's question, you would only have a taxable income of about $90,000. And the really neat thing, if you have a taxable income in 2024 for a married joint couple less than roughly $92,000, is your capital gains tax rate is 0. This is one of the biggest benefits of being where we are in this tax bracket in the tax code, and that if you can realize gains under that level, you're really only talking about a 10% ordinary income tax on the remaining ordinary income less standard deduction. So therefore, this taxpayer in this specific example for a married filing joint would pay $1,600 on $120,000 of income because the capital gains are getting taxed on top of the ordinary income less standard deduction. So the way I think about it is I would kind of sit down with the CPA ahead of time, right? Because you need to make these decisions in October, November, December, in Q4.
Right. What are your dividends going to be? What's your Social Security going to be?
Yep.
Add that on top of your income.
Project out and then say, look, I want to stay below this threshold, right? Like I said, roughly $120,000. And if you're able to do that, and all those gains are long-term capital gains, you get them tax-free at the federal level. Not a bad gig, given a savings rate. So
a lot of people do worry about taxes in retirement, but it's actually a pretty good deal if you know what you're doing.
If you defer, right? And so that's the game. That's the game. And so I think, like, very generally, again, Ben, I'm Roth IRA all the way, but there are reasons to think about deferral via traditional IRA. There are reasons to think about deferral via this mechanism, and the ability to take a capital gains tax rate, in retirement is pretty awesome, especially if you can get that at 0%. If you trip the wire, if you go higher, maybe you're paying at 15%. It's not the end of the world.
And another reason why that tax diversification piece is so big, right?
Yep.
Having different sources to draw from.
Speaking of tax diversification, this is our last bonus question. So in honor of Duncan not being here, I'm working on graphic T-shirts or something we can all wear. Ben, I need you to choose between the Duncans. Which one we got? We have Duncan number 1. That's happy-go-lucky Duncan. We have Duncan number 2. For some reason, GPT aged Duncan a little bit. I don't know.
So this is obviously an AI-based picture of Duncan.
I cannot confirm or deny. I might have done it in the bathroom getting ready for this show. Picture 3 is like futuristic cool Duncan, and picture 4 is like Joey Fishman. I'm going camping with my buddy in Oregon, Duncan. Which Duncan do you choose for a graphic
Number
T-shirt? 1
actually looks a lot like Duncan, and I think the most like him. Number 2 is the one that we show him if we want him to start actually planning for retirement. Those studies they say, the way to get people to save is to show them what they're going to look like when they're older. I think that we do young Duncan on the front, old Duncan on the back.
Got it.
That's the T-shirt.
I got a phone call coming in. It's Sydney Sweeney. She wants to discuss you dunking on her for her work in Euphoria, which was great, by the way. She's awesome.
She cries every scene. I'm sorry. That's right. 2 of the 4 of them were from Euphoria. Duncan is going to be back next week. Bill's going to present him with a T-shirt, I think. Bill, thank you for standing in.
I did the best I could. I'm no Duncan
As always. Hill. Yes, you get asked for by name more than anyone else. Remember, our email here, askthecompoundshow@gmail.com. We still got a huge Google Doc full of questions, which is always great. Keep them coming. Thanks, everyone, on the live show. As usual, we appreciate it. New Compound and Friends tomorrow, and we'll be back here, same time, same place next week. Thank you. See you then.